I am Sergeant Julia Hall, 31 years old, and this is the story of how I lost my family and found myself right at a banquet table. At the Army Ball, on my birthday, my mother-in-law, Margaret, smiled in front of my commanding officers and handed me a glittering envelope. Inside were divorce papers. My husband, David, pointed his phone's camera directly at my face. He was filming. Margaret's voice was sickeningly sweet. "Happy birthday, darling. This is a gift from all of us. My son deserves a real wife, someone who can elevate the family's status, not a servant." They waited for me to break down. They didn't know. They had no idea about the letter in my purse. They didn't know that they had just handed me the key to my own freedom. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you have ever had your career and your value belittled by the very people who were supposed to love you most. The ballroom at the Fort Hood Event Center was draped in Army blue and gold. It was the annual Army Ball, a night steeped in tradition, a night I actually loved. It's a sacred space for us. We honor the flag, we toast the nation, and we maintain the somber POWMIA table at the front, an empty seat for those who never came home. I was wearing my best uniform, the Army Service Uniform, or ASU. Its dark blue fabric feeling like armor, my awards and ribbons perfectly aligned over my heart. Our table was a mix. My unit was there, including my first sergeant, Michael Carter, a man who had been a quiet mentor to me. And then there was my other family. My husband, David, looking uncomfortable in his rented tux. His sister, Emma, who was practically vibrating with a giddy, cruel energy. And the matriarch herself, Margaret Hall, draped in a designer gown that probably cost more than my last 3 paychecks. She was old money from Highland Park, Dallas, and she never let you forget it. The ceremony had just concluded. The lights came up slightly, and the band started a soft jazz tune. I was smiling, genuinely happy. It was my 31st birthday, and for the first time, my husband's family was attending a military function with me. I had been so desperate for their acceptance, so blind. That's when Margaret stood up. She clinked her glass. "A toast," she said, her voice carrying clearly across our table. The music quieted. David pulled out his phone. I tensed. "Mom, what are you doing?" David whispered, but he was already hitting record. "Julia," Margaret said, her smile like polished marble. She slid a glittering hot pink envelope across the white linen tablecloth. "We know how much you value service. So, we are serving you with this." The table went silent. First, Sergeant Carter, a man I'd never seen rattled, froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. I looked at David, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking through his phone screen, his face a mask. My fingers felt numb as I picked up the envelope. It was the same one, the one from 3 days ago. My mind reeled, pulling me back from the ballroom. Back to our small, rented house in Killeen, Texas, just outside the main gate of Fort Hood. I'd just gotten home from a long day at the logistics depot, my boots still dusty. I found Margaret sitting at our kitchen table, alone. She was examining a stack of thick, legal-looking documents. She jumped when I walked in, startled. "Julia?" With a flustered bird-like motion, she'd scooped the papers up and shoved them into that exact hot pink envelope, the kind you'd get at a dollar store. "Darling," she'd chirped, using a pet name she had never, ever used before. "I was just preparing your special gift. We're all so excited." I must have looked confused. "A gift?" She gave a high-pitched laugh. "For your birthday, of course. It's something that will change everything." She smiled then, a wide, bright smile that didn't touch her eyes. It was the smile of a predator that had just cornered its prey. I should have known then. I should have seen the red flags that were practically waving in my face. The whole ball, this entire night, had been Margaret's idea. For 2 years, she had refused to even visit Killeen, calling it a dreadful, dusty town. She referred to my career as playing in the mud and called my fellow soldiers uneducated laborers. My world, my service, my pride, it was all tacky and uncultured to her. Then, 2 weeks ago, she had called. "Julia, darling," she'd cooed. I hear the Army Ball is coming up. I insist we all attend. As a family, we want to honor your service. I was so stunned I actually dropped the phone. When I relayed the news to David, he just nodded enthusiastically. See, I told you she'd come around. It's the least we can do for my wife. Even Emma, his vapid sister, had texted me, OMG, an Army Ball? How quaint. This will be so much fun. I see it now. I see the trap I walked right into, blinded by my own desperate, pathetic need for their approval. I wanted so badly to be part of their perfect Dallas family that I ignored every instinct. And David. God, David. The night before the ball. My last night as a 30-year-old, he'd come up behind me while I was polishing my shoes. He put his arms around my waist, an unfamiliar, almost hesitant gesture. We hadn't been close, not really, for months. He spent more time on the phone with his mother than he did in the same room as me. But that night, he held me tight. He buried his face in my hair. Tomorrow will be a day you'll never forget, Julia, he whispered. I promise. I'd closed my eyes, a genuine smile spreading across my face. I'd fallen asleep that night feeling hopeful, thinking it was a promise of love, a new beginning. I snapped back to the present, the ballroom, the staring faces. My thumb broke the cheap foil seal on the pink envelope. I pulled out the papers. They were thick, official. And right on the top page, I saw the words, Petition for Dissolution of Marriage. The music stopped. Or maybe it just felt that way. My entire world compressed into the sheet of paper in my hand, the clinking of Emma's champagne glass, and the cold, triumphant look in Margaret's eyes. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, but still loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. My son needs someone who can attend charity galas in Dallas, Julia. Someone who understands our world. Not someone who's content to play in the mud. I stared at the paper. At the bottom of the last page, I saw his signature. David's familiar, neat signature, which he'd clearly penned days ago. I looked up from the confession, from that deceitful promise. I looked at my husband. He was still filming, his hand perfectly steady. And I realized, as the room began to spin, that David's whisper wasn't a promise of love. It was a guilty man's confession. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was detonating. The humiliation was a physical force, hot and sharp, spreading from my chest to my fingertips. I looked at their smug, expectant faces, Margaret, David, Emma, a united front of contempt. Why? Why did they hate me so much? That disdain? Where did it truly begin? The contempt? That's what it was. A cold, suffocating contempt that I had mistaken for… what? Shyness? A different background? No. It was exactly what it looked like, and it had been there from the very beginning. My mind, still reeling in that ballroom, pulled me further back, past the pink envelope, past the fake promises. It pulled me back 2 years to the week after our honeymoon. We were at a cocktail party at Margaret's sprawling home in Highland Park, Dallas. It was a world of hushed tones, old art, and women with surgically smooth foreheads. I was wearing the nicest civilian dress I owned, a simple navy blue sheath, and I felt like a child playing dress-up. Margaret, holding a champagne flute like it was an extension of her hand, was introducing me to her friends, women named Bitsy and Catherine. And this, she said, gesturing to me, is David's wife, Julia. Her friends smiled, polite and vapid. Then Margaret delivered the clarification, her voice dropping just a fraction, as if sharing a slightly embarrassing secret. She's a sergeant. She said sergeant the same way she might have said plumber or convict. She emphasized the rank, not as an achievement, but as a brand, a mark of a lower class. I watched the polite smiles on her friends' faces tighten, replaced by a look of pity. Not for me. For David. Before I could even speak, Margaret turned, beaming, and pulled her daughter close. And you all know my Emma. She's just been engaged to a wonderful cardiologist. A real career. We are just over the moon. I stood there, invisible. I, a non-commissioned officer in the United States Army who managed logistics for hundreds of soldiers, was invisible next to a man who hadn't even joined the family yet. David just squeezed my hand, a weak, apologetic gesture, and led me toward the bar. He didn't defend me. He never defended me. That was the pattern. The cuts weren't always so direct. Most of the time they were subtle, 1,000 tiny paper cuts of exclusion and comparison. But the holidays? The holidays were when Margaret sharpened her knives. Our first Thanksgiving. I was so excited. I was from a small middle-class family where Thanksgiving meant a crowded table, the Macy's parade on TV, and paper pilgrim hats. Margaret's Thanksgiving was a production. It was held in a dining room that looked like a museum, with a 20-foot table, polished silver, and a professionally catered, glistening turkey. It was a Hall family tradition, Margaret explained, for everyone to go around the table and say what they were most thankful for. David, sitting to his mother's right, went first. "I'm thankful for my new promotion at the firm," he said, puffing out his chest. Emma, texting under the table, said she was thankful for her fiancé's future earnings. Then Margaret. She smiled, a warm, genuine smile she never used on me. "I'm thankful for Emma's wonderful fiancé, a doctor in the family, at last. Such a respectable, intelligent man." Then it was my turn. The table was silent. All eyes were on me. I cleared my throat, my voice feeling too loud in the cavernous room. I'm thankful for my service, and for my soldiers." Margaret let out a short, sharp laugh, a scoff. She cut me off, turning to the table at large. "Oh yes, we should all be thankful Julia is safe. After all, it's not as if everyone has the proper education for a real office job, is it? We need people for all sorts of work." The implication hung in the air, thick and rancid. Blue collar, uneducated, laborer. My face burned hot. I looked at David. I pleaded with my eyes for him to say something, anything, to defend the service I was so proud of. He just looked down. He picked up his fork and stared intently at his slice of pumpkin pie, as if it held the secrets to the universe. He was silent. His silence was his answer. His silence was a betrayal. It was the moment I learned that the absence of support is its own kind of violence. The holidays became a minefield. That Christmas, the disparity was almost comical. David, the heir, received a vintage Rolex. Emma, the princess, was gifted an all-expenses-paid trip to Paris. I was handed a small, neatly wrapped gift. I opened it. Inside was a thick paperback book. Career Transitions for Veterans, from Military to Manual Labor. Tucked inside the cover was a neatly folded, sterile, pale blue set of nurse's scrubs. "I was thinking, Julia, dear," Margaret said, sipping her morning mimosa, "that you should prepare for a more realistic service job after you leave the army." She gestured at the scrubs. "Perhaps you could find work." "Oh, cleaning at my son-in-law's hospital. I'm sure he could get you an interview in housekeeping." I just sat there, the cheap, starchy fabric in my lap, the Rolex gleaming on David's wrist, and I felt nothing but a cold, heavy resignation. David again said nothing. I endured it. I endured it because I loved him, or at least, I loved the man I thought he was. I told myself this was just how old money families were. I told myself I just needed to try harder, to prove my worth, to be better. The end of that hope came on a random Tuesday, 6 months before the Army ball. I had come home early, which I rarely did. I walked in just as David was hanging up the phone, his face pale and stressed. "Who was that?" I asked. "Oh, just work," he lied, badly. Just then, his phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Mom. It read, "She can't find out. Just handle it." "Handle what, David?" I asked, my blood turning to ice. He sighed, a long, weary sigh of a man trapped. And then, he confessed. Not everything, but enough. Margaret was pressuring him. The family's trust, the inheritance. It was all tied to David presenting the right image. And a grunt for a wife wasn't part of that image. It all clicked into place after that. If you've ever been in a position where your partner's silence was the loudest sound in the room, if you know what it feels like to be screaming on the inside while the person who is supposed to protect you just looks away, hit that like button to show some support. Let me know in the comments, just one word. Have you ever felt invisible to the people who were supposed to see you first? The final, fatal blow came about a month after that. I was in the kitchen, and David was in the study on a conference call with his mother. He thought I was outside, on a run. But I was standing right there, motionless, listening through the slightly open door. I heard Margaret's voice, sharp and clear. "You cannot let her embarrass this family any longer. You are a Hall. Your father would be ashamed. She's a grunt, David, a common soldier. You have to make a choice. It's her, or this family's fortune. And I mean it." There was a long pause. I held my breath, praying, begging him, just in my mind, "Stand up for me. Please, just this once." And then I heard his voice, not angry, not defiant, but exhausted, defeated. "I know, Mom," he sighed. "I know. I'll handle it. I'll handle it." That was it. That was the moment I knew. He had already made his choice. He handled it by agreeing to her plan, by smiling as she picked out that tacky pink envelope, by setting the stage for my public execution. I had already lost him, long before he ever signed those papers. They would never change. I couldn't change them. What could I do to get out? What could I do for myself? That question, what could I do for myself, became a desperate, burning obsession. After that phone call, after hearing David's weak, final betrayal, something inside me didn't just break, it hardened. I was done trying to earn their love. I would, instead, force their respect. My logic was flawed, I see that now. It was the logic of a person still chained to their oppressors, but it was the only logic I had. If they despised Sergeant Hall, then I would become someone they couldn't ignore. I would become Officer Hall. The plan formed with a cold, frantic energy. "I will show them," I whispered to myself as I scrubbed the grout in our rented bathroom. "I'll get a rank so high, a position so undeniable, that Margaret will have to choke on her words." My target was clear: Officer Candidate School, OCS. It was the only way up that I knew, the only path that could bridge the chasm between their old money world and my enlisted grunt reality. I already had some college credits from before I joined, but I needed a full bachelor's degree to apply. The very next day, I enrolled in online classes through the University of Maryland Global Campus, the UMGC. Every soldier knows it. It's the school you go to when you're deployed, when you're in the barracks, when you're trying to build a future in the slivers of time the Army doesn't own. I paid the initial enrollment fee out of my own savings, clicking submit with a shaking hand. I told myself it was an investment. I told myself it was armor. I didn't tell David. Not at first. My life, which was already demanding, transformed into a waking nightmare. It became a grueling, relentless marathon run on two separate, warring tracks. My alarm went off at 04:30. By 05 I was on the field for PT, physical training, doing push-ups in the wet, pre-dawn grass of Fort Hood. By 06:30, I was showering and changing. By 07 I was at the logistics depot, managing manifests, tracking million-dollar pieces of equipment, and leading my soldiers. My workday was a minimum of 10 hours, often more. I'd get home around 19 code, or 7 p.m. I'd walk in the door, my uniform covered in the fine brown dust of a field training exercise, FTX, my body aching, my brain fried. There was no welcome home. There was no how was your day. David would already be on the couch, watching a game, a beer sweating on the side table. He'd look up, sniff, and say, "You're tracking dirt in." I'd nod, too tired to speak. I'd shower, eat a bowl of cereal for dinner, and then, at 8 p.m., my second day would begin. I'd sit at the small desk in our spare bedroom, boot up my laptop, and stare at the glowing screen. A discussion post on the political implications of the American Revolution. a 2,000-word essay on U.S. history, reading assignments that my tired eyes could barely focus on. The small desk lamp became my only companion. I'd type, delete, and type again. The sound of the keys clicking in the silent house. About a week into this new routine, David appeared at the doorway, squinting. "Do you have to do that right now?" He'd mumble, irritated. "That light is annoying." "I have a paper due, David," I'd whisper back, trying not to wake the resentment I knew was simmering. "Whatever," he'd huff. "You're obsessed." The next night, he moved his pillow and blanket to the guest room. He said the sound of my typing kept him awake. He said I was no fun anymore. He was right. I was no fun. I was a machine running on fumes, fueled by spite and caffeine. I was exhausted, I was isolated, and I was completely, utterly alone. But I kept going. I finished the semester with a 4.0 GPA. I was one step closer. Then came the financial stab. To register for the next, more intensive semester, I needed to apply for financial aid. I sat at the kitchen table, filling out the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. It was a document I knew well from my first try at college. But there was a new, terrible complication. Because I was married, I was required to report my spouse's income. And because I needed a student loan to cover the gap, the application required his signature. David, an accountant, a man who understood numbers better than he understood people. I waited until a Saturday morning. I made coffee. I laid the papers out on the table, along with a pen. "Hey," I said, my voice trying to sound casual. "I just need you to look this over and sign. It's for my FAFSA. For my classes." He looked at the papers. He looked at me. His face, which I had once found handsome, twisted into a mask of pure, cold condescension. Margaret's condescension. He didn't pick up the pen. He swiped the papers off the table. They scattered across the linoleum floor. "Are you kidding me with this?" He spat, his voice low and sharp. "More debt? For what? For this fantasy?" "It's not a fantasy, David. It's a path. It's OCS." "OCS?" He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Julia, be realistic. Look at yourself. You don't have what it takes. You're not officer material." His words hit me harder than any physical blow. "You're not officer material." It was the same as Lalem grunt. The same as manual labor. The same as not a real wife. "You're wasting your time, Julia," he said, turning away from me. "You're wasting our money. My mother is right. You should be trying to learn a real, safe skill. Something for when this army thing is over. Not this." He walked out of the room. The papers, my application, my hope, lay scattered at my feet. His words did what the 0430 alarms and the 2 a.m. essays couldn't. They broke me. I couldn't get the loan without his signature. I couldn't afford the classes without the loan. My dream, my entire desperate plan to show them, dissolved in a single, cruel moment of financial and emotional sabotage. The OCS dream was dead. I stopped the classes. I stopped talking about the future. I just existed. I went to work. I came home. David moved back into our bedroom, as if nothing had happened. I started quietly applying for civilian jobs, logistics management, project coordination, anything to build an escape hatch. But every application I sent out was met with a digital, form letter rejection. "Thank you for your interest, but we have decided to move forward with other candidates." No interviews, no calls, nothing. I didn't know it then, but I do now. Margaret, with her Highland Park connections, was ensuring every door I tried to open was slammed shut in my face. I had no options. I was trapped. That night, after another silent, agonizing dinner, I couldn't go home. I couldn't sit in that house, breathing the same air as the man who had so casually, so thoroughly, destroyed my last hope. I got in my Jeep. I just drove. And I found myself where I always did, back on post, in the large, mostly empty parking lot of my unit's headquarters, parked under a flickering yellow security light. I was supposed to be strong. I was a sergeant. I led soldiers. I wasn't allowed to be this weak. but I put my hands on the steering wheel, my forehead on my hands, and I finally let it out. I sat there, alone in my car, in the dark, and I cried. I cried for the wasted effort, for the lost hope, for the absolute, crushing loneliness of being married to a man who was my enemy. I had tried to change. I had tried to be better, to be smarter, to be someone they couldn't mock, and I had failed. I don't know how long I sat there in that parking lot, hunched over the steering wheel of my Jeep, completely broken. The tears were the silent, exhausted kind. The kind that come after the anger has burned away, leaving nothing but a cold, hollow ache. I had failed. I was trapped. A soft, firm, tap, tap, tap on the driver's side window made me jolt upright, my heart hammering in my chest. Through the glass and my own blurry reflection, I saw him. First Sergeant Michael Carter, my company's first sergeant. In the Army, the first sergeant is the father, the mother, the high priest, and the chief enforcer all rolled into one. They are the senior non-commissioned officer, the one who knows everything, sees everything, and handles everything. Carter was a man in his 50s, a lifer, with deep lines around his eyes and a presence that commanded instant respect. I frantically wiped my face with my sleeves, my cheeks burning with a new, different shame. Don't let him see you cry. Don't be that soldier. He didn't move. He just waited. I fumbled with the button and rolled the window down, the cool Texas night air hitting my hot face. First Sergeant, I managed to croak. First Sergeant Carter didn't ask me if I was okay. He didn't ask me what was wrong. He didn't ask why one of his sergeants was crying alone in her car at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. He simply held out a steaming paper cup from the small 24-hour coffee shop on post. It's black. Looks like you could use it, Sergeant, he said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and utterly calm. I took it, my hand shaking. Sir, First Sergeant, I'm sorry. Nothing to be sorry for, Hall. He didn't leave. He didn't pry. He just stood there. He leaned one hand on the roof of my Jeep and looked out over the parking lot, giving me the dignity of not being stared at while I tried to pull myself together. We were just two soldiers, sharing a moment of quiet in the darkness. The silence wasn't awkward. It was patient. I took a sip of the scalding, bitter coffee. It was the worst coffee on post, but in that moment, it was the warmest, kindest thing I'd ever felt. After a long minute, he spoke to the night air, not to me. Hall, I don't know what's going on in your world, and frankly, it's not my business. I flinched, ready for a lecture. He turned his head just slightly, his eyes meeting mine in the dim light. But I do know what happens inside this fence line. And in here, you are one of the best NCOs I've got. You're tough, you're smart, you accomplish the mission, and your soldiers respect you. That's not my opinion, Hall. That's the fact. I stared at him, my throat closing up. Whatever it is, he continued, whatever is happening out there. He nodded his head toward the main gate, toward the civilian world. You don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough. You don't let them take what you've earned in here. And that was it. That's what finally broke the dam. I started to cry again. Not the silent, hopeless sobs from before. This was something different. This was a flood of relief, of gratitude so profound it was painful. I cried because, for the first time in 2 years, someone saw me. They saw Sergeant Hall, not David's wife. They saw my value, not my potential for a safer career. First, Sergeant Carter let out a slow, heavy sigh. He sounded like a man who had seen this 1,000 times. It's the spouse, isn't it? He said, not as a question, but a statement. I just nodded, unable to speak, feeling the hot tears roll down my face. He looked up at the stars. I went through a bad one myself. Back in 2009, after my 3rd deployment, came home and she'd cleaned out the whole house, took the dog, left nothing but a stack of bills and a Dear John letter. He paused, and for the first time, I heard the man, not just the rank. Sometimes Julia, he said, using my first name so softly I almost missed it. This uniform, This, this green suit, it understands us better than the person sleeping in our bed. He pushed off the Jeep and stood up straight. The Army's not perfect. God knows it's broken in 100 ways, but it is a family, and we take care of our own. You remember that? I finally found my voice. Thank you, First Sergeant. You have no idea. Yes, I do, he said simply. By the way, I was processing awards this afternoon. I saw you never got put in for that last leadership commendation, the one for the FTX loadout, the one you single-handedly saved from being a complete disaster. I'd been so consumed by David's rejection of my OCS application, I'd completely forgotten about it. I missed the deadline, First Sergeant. I know, he said. So I backdated the paperwork and signed it myself. It'll be on your record by Friday. Don't let it happen again. He was telling me he knew. He knew I was distracted, and instead of punishing me, he had covered for me. He had protected me. He tapped the roof of the Jeep twice. Go home, Hall. Get some sleep. I'll see you at PT 05 Suarez Pause. And with that, he was gone, walking back toward the NCO barracks. I sat there for a long time, holding the warm coffee cup. He had, in the span of 10 minutes, given me everything David and Margaret had spent 2 years taking away. Validation, respect, a future. He hadn't told me to change. He hadn't told me to be someone else, to get a real education, or to be safer. He had told me that I, Julia Hall, as I was more than enough. It was the most profound kindness I had ever experienced, and as the warmth of the coffee spread through me, I felt a sharp, unexpected sting of sadness, a bitter, sweet ache. I was so grateful to First Sergeant Carter, but I was also so sad. Because he wasn't the one who was supposed to do this. The man who had vowed to love and protect me, the one who was supposed to be my partner. He was the one who was silent. He was the one who told me I wasn't good enough. I finally understood. My real family wasn't the one I'd married into. It was the one I'd enlisted into. It was the men and women who wore the same uniform, who understood the same sacrifices, and who, when you fell, would be the ones to pick you up, hand you a cup of terrible coffee, and tell you to get back in the fight. I started the Jeep, the engine rumbling to life. I felt, not fixed, but reinforced. I had a family. I was a sergeant, and I was going to be okay. The encounter with First Sergeant Carter reinforced me. It didn't fix my life, but it reminded me that I wasn't crazy. I was valuable, even if my own husband couldn't see it. But I was still trapped. The OCS dream was dead, suffocated by David. My applications for civilian jobs were still met with a wall of automated rejections. I was at my absolute lowest point. I was stuck in a house with a man who despised me, tied to a family who wanted me erased, and I could see no way out. This was my state of mind about 1 week before the Army ball. It was late, probably after 10 p.m. David was asleep, or pretending to be, in the guest room. I was at my usual post, at the small desk in the spare room, under the dim light of the single lamp. I wasn't doing homework anymore. I was just scrolling. Mindlessly scrolling through job sites, bracing myself for the next "thank you for your interest" email. I had my LinkedIn profile open. I rarely checked it. It felt pointless. It was just a collection of skills that, according to Margaret, were worthless. But there was a small 1 in a red circle over the messaging icon. I clicked it. It was an in-mail, not from a random connection, but from a senior talent acquisition manager. The name was formal. The company name next to it made my heart stop. Aegis Defense Solutions. Aegis, as in one of the top defense contractors in the world. The kind of company that builds guidance systems and advanced armor. The kind of company that doesn't just hire grunts. My hands were shaking. I thought it was a mistake. I thought it was spam. I opened the message. Dear Sergeant Hall, it began. My rank. Used as a title of respect, not an insult. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm a senior recruiter with Aegis Defense Solutions. I came across your profile on a veteran-focused job board and was immediately, deeply impressed. I read that line 3 times, deeply impressed. I hadn't felt impressed by myself in 2 years. I kept reading. Your experience in complex logistics management, your proven ability to lead small teams, and your extensive history of operating under high-pressure environments is precisely what we are seeking for a new project. My vision blurred. I was reading a description of my career, but through a completely different lens. What Margaret called playing in the mud, this recruiter called operating under high-pressure environments. What David called a waste of time, she called complex logistics management. And then came the sentence. The one that changed everything. The one that I will remember for the rest of my life. We find, she wrote, that a military background like yours isn't something to be transitioned from. It is an invaluable asset. An invaluable asset. The words hit me like a physical force. I choked back a sob, pressing my hand to my mouth. Invaluable asset. The only other time I had heard that phrase was from Margaret's lips, describing her grandmother's 3-carat diamond ring. This recruiter, this professional, this total stranger, was using that same phrase. About me. About my work. About the very things my family used to ridicule me. I, a common soldier, was an invaluable asset. The email wasn't just a feeler, it was a direct invitation. We would be honored, she wrote, if you would agree to a video interview with our department head. We can make time tomorrow, if your schedule permits. I stared at the screen for a full minute, my heart hammering against my ribs. Was this real? I wrote back, my fingers flying across the keys, my voice professional and calm, even as my world was tilting on its axis. Yes, Ms. Chen, I am available. Tomorrow afternoon works perfectly. The next 24 hours were a blur. I took a half-day of personal leave, citing a dental appointment. I ironed my most professional blouse, the one I kept for Army review boards. I sat at that same small desk, but instead of a desperate failed student, I was a professional. The interview was easy. It was terrifying, but it was easy. The man I spoke to, a retired Navy captain, didn't ask me about my feelings. He didn't ask me about my husband's family. He asked me about work. Talk me through the last time you had a critical supply chain failure, he said. So I did. I told him about an FTX where a convoy was rerouted and I had to coordinate with 3 different units, in the dark, with bad radio signals to get multi-million-dollar tank parts to the front line before morning. I told him about how I managed my soldiers, how I tracked the inventory, and how we got it done. I was just describing my Tuesday. He listened, nodding, not smiling, but focused. Good, he said. That's exactly what this job is. It's just, the front line is a boardroom in DC. The interview ended. I shut the laptop. I felt a buzz I hadn't felt in years. The buzz of confidence. The very next day, Friday, an email arrived. It wasn't from the recruiter. It was from Aegis Human Resources. The subject line, Conditional Offer of Employment, Project Manager. I opened it. Position, Project Manager, Logistics and Integration. Location, Austin, Texas. Starting salary, $85,000 per year. Additional, full comprehensive benefits and a generous relocation package. $85,000. I did the math in my head. It was nearly double my current pay as a sergeant. It was more than David made as a junior accountant. It was enough. It was enough to get my own apartment in Austin. It was enough to pay my own bills. It was enough to leave. It was enough to start a new life, a life where I was the only person who defined my worth. This was the escape hatch. This was the vindication. This was the answer to, what can I do for myself? A plan, cold and sharp, clicked into place. My birthday was in a week. The Army ball was in a week. And Margaret and David were, as she had promised, preparing a gift that would change everything. I looked at the email. I looked at the $85,000 offer. So am I whispered. I decided in that moment to keep this an absolute secret. They were busy setting their stage, unaware that the script had changed. They thought they were in control. But I had a new, powerful secret. I had an ace. I hit print. I listened to our cheap printer whine as it spat out the official offer letter, the one with the Aegis logo at the top. I folded the paper carefully into a neat, small rectangle. I went into the bedroom and opened my closet. Hanging in the back, in a plastic dry cleaner bag, was the small black clutch purse I intended to carry with my uniform at the Army ball. I unzipped it. I slid the folded letter, my secret, my weapon, my escape, into the silk-lined interior. I zipped it closed. I walked out of the Aegis interview and the subsequent offer with a secret weapon tucked away. But a strange thing happened in the days that followed. The initial adrenaline, the cold, sharp relief of having an escape plan, began to fade. And in its place, a different feeling crept in. A cold, heavy dread. I had the offer. $85,000. A new life in Austin. All I had to do was click accept, and I couldn't. I would open the email on my phone. I'd stare at the reply button. My thumb would hover over the screen. And I would be paralyzed, frozen by a terror so profound it made my stomach clench. What was wrong with me? This was everything I wanted. This was my validation. This was my escape hatch, my vindication, my ticket out. But instead of feeling joy, I was terrified. And then I heard her voice, as clearly as if she were in the room. Margaret's. You, a project manager? Don't be ridiculous. You're just a sergeant. You're not smart enough for that world. You'll fail. You'll be exposed as a fraud. You're just a grunt, playing dress-up. And David's voice, weaker, but just as cutting. Be realistic, Julia. You don't have what it takes. You're wasting your time. For 2 years, they had systematically dismantled my self-worth. They had poisoned my own perception of myself. They had done it so effectively that now, even when a golden, life-changing opportunity was handed to me, I was the one sabotaging it. Their voices were now my inner voice. I had become my own oppressor. I was convinced that Aegis had made a mistake, that the retired Navy captain hadn't seen the real me, that I had somehow fooled them, and that if I accepted, I would show up in Austin and, within a week, they would realize their terrible error. They'd fire me, and I'd be left with nothing. No army, no husband, no future. Just a broken lease and crushing humiliation. The fear was so strong it was a physical sickness. The deadline to accept the offer was Monday. It was now Saturday. The Army ball was in just a few days, on my birthday. I was running out of time. I sat in my car, staring at my phone, my finger hovering over the delete button. Not just to delete the email, but to delete the hope. It was too painful, too dangerous, to hope. It was safer to stay in the misery I knew. It was safer to stay the grunt Margaret always said I was. I was going to reject the offer. I was going to choose the prison I knew over the freedom I didn't feel I deserved. I put my head on the steering wheel, defeated. I can't do it, I whispered. I'm not good enough. Can't do what, Hall? The deep voice made me jump, yet again. I looked up. First Sergeant Carter was walking by, carrying a stack of manila folders. He must have been working on a Saturday. I couldn't stop the words from tumbling out. I didn't tell him the details, not about Aegis, not about the $85,000. I couldn't. First Sergeant, I said, my voice thick. How do you know? How do you know when to keep fighting for something and when to just give up? When to accept that you're just not cut out for it? He stopped, his NCO radar on high alert. He could smell a crisis a mile away. He looked at me, really looked at me, with those patient, all-seeing eyes. You're struggling with a decision, he stated. Yes, First Sergeant, I have a big opportunity, a new path, but I'm scared. I'm scared I'm not good enough for it. I'm scared I'll fail. And I don't know if I should even try. First Sergeant Carter, a man who I knew was religious, a man who had been through multiple deployments and a devastating divorce, looked at me with a profound, knowing sadness. Hall, he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Do you know the Serenity Prayer? I've heard it, First Sergeant, for, like, AA meetings, right? It's not just for alcoholics, Julia, he said, using my first name again. It's for soldiers. It's for people who are in a fight they can't control. He leaned against the hood of my Jeep, looking out at the drab brown headquarters building. He didn't recite it like a man saying grace. He spoke it like a creed, like a weapon. God, grant me the serenity, he said, his voice a low rumble, to accept the things I cannot change. He paused, and he turned his head to look directly at me. The courage to change the things I can? He held my gaze, his eyes sharp, driving the words into me. And the wisdom to know the difference. I just stared at him, my breath caught in my chest. He stood up straight. You are in a cage, Hall, and you're not sure which parts of it are real and which parts are in your own head. I think so. So let's use the prayer, he said, all business, like a drill sergeant breaking down a rifle. What can you not change? Let's start there. I can't change how they see me, I whispered, and I knew I wasn't talking about the Aegis recruiters. I was talking about the Halls. I can't change Margaret. I can't change David. I can't make them respect me. I tried. I failed. Exactly, Carter said, nodding sharply. You cannot change them. That is a fact. You have been throwing yourself against a steel door, and it will not budge. That is the thing you must accept. You must find the serenity to stop. He let that sink in. The serenity to stop trying to win their approval. Now, he said, what can you change? My mind flashed to the email on my phone. The $85,000. The apartment in Austin. The project manager title. My future, I said, the words barely audible. My location. My job. There you go, he said. That is the thing you can't change. That is where you need to find the courage. He tapped his finger on the window, right in front of my face. Your problem, Hall, is that your enemies have stolen your wisdom. They've gotten so deep inside your head that you can't tell the steel door from the open one. They've convinced you that everything is a steel door. It was like a lightning bolt, a slap in the face, a key turning in a lock I didn't even know was there. You cannot change them, he repeated. That's the serenity part. You can change you. He pointed at me. That's the courage part. Your entire mission right now is to find the wisdom to know the difference. He stepped back. Don't let them steal your wisdom, Hall. Don't let them win. I watched him walk away, the manila folders tucked under his arm. I sat there, the engine off, the car silent. Serenity. To accept the things I cannot change. Margaret, David, their hatred. Courage to change the things I can. Aegis, Austin, my entire life. Wisdom to know the difference. It was so simple, so brutal, and so liberating. The voices of Margaret and David were still there. You'll fail. You're not good enough. But now I had a new voice, a stronger one. First, Sergeant Carter's. Don't let them steal your wisdom. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I picked up my phone. My thumb was no longer shaking. I opened the email from Aegis Human Resources. I pressed reply. I typed, Dear Ms. Chen and the Aegis team, I am thrilled to formally accept your offer for the project manager position. I am eager to begin. I hit send. A wave of terror, and beneath it, a powerful, deep current of relief washed over me. I had done it. I had accepted the things I couldn't change, and I had just found the courage to change the things I could. Hitting send on that email to Aegis didn't just accept a job. It deployed a weapon. My secret. In that single moment, the entire dynamic of my life shifted. The wisdom from First Sergeant Carter's prayer had given me an anchor. I had accepted what I couldn't change, the halls, and I had taken courage to change what I could, my future. The days leading up to the Army Ball were strange. I was no longer a victim trapped in a cage. I was an observer, a strategist, watching a play I already knew the ending to. The fear that had paralyzed me for 2 years was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp, and patient focus. I was at home in our kitchen, a few days before the ball, when Margaret repeated her performance. I came in from the garage, and she was at the kitchen table, just as I had seen her before. She had a stack of legal documents and that same, glittery, offensively pink birthday envelope. When she saw me, she did her practiced, theatrical gasp. "Oh, Julia, darling, you startled me." She hurriedly, almost clumsily, shuffled the papers into the envelope. Last time I saw this, I was a confused, wounded animal, too desperate for affection to see the trap. Now, having accepted the Aegis offer, I saw her for exactly what she was. A predator, a clumsy one. "Just getting your special birthday gift ready, dear," she chirped, that high society Dallas accent dripping with fake sugar. "As I told you, it's something that is going to change everything." I looked at her, at the envelope that I knew held divorce papers, and I smiled, a small, genuine, calm smile. "I'm sure it will, Margaret," I said, my voice even. "I can't wait." She paused, her own smile faltering for a fraction of a second. She had expected me to be nervous or needy, or to ask, "Oh, what is it?" She wasn't prepared for calm. "You have no idea how right you are," I thought, grabbing a bottle of water. "It is going to change everything, just not the way you've planned." David was even worse. Now that the ambush was set, he was overcompensating. He was trying to act like a loving husband. It was pathetic, and it was infuriating. He tried to touch the small of my back as I passed him in the hallway. "You look beautiful today, Julia." I would just look at him, my face a blank mask. "Am wearing your mess dress to the ball, right?" he asked, referring to the most formal, expensive military uniform, the one that looked like a tuxedo. "Or that other one." He hated my Army service uniform, my ASU. He, like his mother, thought it was the uniform of the help. "The ASU, David," I said flatly. He sighed, running a hand through his hair, his eyes already darting to the living room where Margaret was. He was looking for her approval, even in this. "Right. Well, it's going to be a great night. You'll see. I promised you, remember? A night you'll never forget." "Oh, I know," I said. He didn't know that I had seen it. 2 nights ago, while he was in the shower, I had used our home computer. He had left his email open. I didn't go looking for it, but it was right there, at the top of his inbox. A forwarded chain from Margaret's family lawyer. The subject line was, "Hall Viven Hall, Final Terms Agreement." I had clicked it. My heart beat a slow, steady, cold drum. I saw David's reply to the lawyer, sent a week prior. "Looks good. I agree to all terms. Please proceed with the service at the event as discussed." He wasn't just a weak, spineless victim of his mother's manipulation. He wasn't a puppet. He was a co-conspirator. He was an active participant in his wife's public humiliation. He had signed off on it. That email was the final piece of my heart turning from hurt to stone. The day before the ball, Margaret called me. "Julia, darling," she sang into the phone, "I just want to confirm you're all prepared for tomorrow evening. It's so important that we're all there. After all," she paused, letting the cruelty hang in the air, "this will be the last time you'll be attending an event as a part of this family." She really thought I was that stupid. She thought it was a subtle threat I wouldn't understand. I leaned back in my office chair at the barracks, looking at the printed Aegis offer sitting on my desk. "You're absolutely right, Margaret," I said, my voice bright. "It's a very important night. I wouldn't miss it for the world. See you tomorrow." I hung up, hearing her sputter on the other end, annoyed that I hadn't broken down, that I hadn't taken the bait. She and David had probably expected me to go out and buy a new ball gown, some pathetic final attempt to win their approval, to look like one of their Dallas socialite friends. I didn't. That evening, I went home, took my Army service uniform, the ASU, out of its protective plastic bag. I laid it on the bed. This was the uniform Margaret called playing in the mud. This was the uniform David was ashamed of. This was the uniform Aegis had called an invaluable asset. I took out my polishing kit. I sat on the floor and methodically shined the brass buttons until they glittered. I used a lint roller on the dark blue jacket. I checked every ribbon, every award, every rank insignia, making sure they were perfectly aligned. This wasn't a dress. This was my armor. This was my identity. This was the skin I had earned, not the one I had married into. Tomorrow night, I would not be Julia Hall, the failed daughter-in-law. I would be Sergeant Hall, Logistics NCO, United States Army, and I would walk into that battle wearing my armor. The night of the ball arrived. My 31st birthday. David was quiet, vibrating with a nervous, giddy energy. I was perfectly calm. I did my makeup. I put my hair up in a tight regulation bun. I put on the uniform. It felt custom-made. It felt powerful. Then, the final piece. I picked up the black clutch purse I was carrying. I opened it. I took the folded-up Aegis offer letter, my weapon, my escape, my future, and slid it into the silk-lined interior. I zipped it closed. I held the small purse in my hand. It was just a few sheets of paper, but in that moment, it felt heavier, more solid, and infinitely more powerful than my M4 rifle. An M4 is a weapon you use to fight an enemy. This was the weapon I was using to save myself. We drove to the event center. We walked into the grand ballroom, the flags of the 50 states and the Army colors lining the entryway. David put his hand on the small of my back. It felt cold, damp, a traitor's touch. I saw our table. Table 12. First Sergeant Carter and his wife were already there, chatting. And so were they. Margaret, David, and Emma. Sitting there, expectant, smiling. Like vultures at a banquet, waiting for the main course to die. They had no idea. They thought they were the hunters. They had no idea I was no longer the prey. If you have ever had to walk into a room knowing you were about to face your biggest battle, hit that like button. Let me know you're ready for this. Comment, show them Julia, below, if you are on my side. I took a slow, steady breath. I walked toward the table. I sat down, placing my small black clutch on my lap. I could feel the sharp corners of the folded letter inside. I looked up and met Margaret's beaming, triumphant smile. The stage was set. The actors were in place. And they had no idea I had rewritten the entire script. I sat there, my hands resting on the black clutch in my lap. I was calm. The room was loud. The clinking of glasses, the murmur of hundreds of conversations, the distant sound of the jazz band playing some patriotic medley. First Sergeant Carter, seated to my left, was in the middle of a story. So the battalion commander says to me, "Top, I don't care how you do it, just get it done." And I said, he never got to finish his sentence. A high-pitched tink-tink-tink sound cut through our table's conversation. Margaret was tapping her champagne flute with a manicured fingernail. The conversation at our table died instantly. "Excuse me, everyone," Margaret said. Her voice, practiced from years of Dallas charity luncheons, cut through the air with an icy precision. She didn't stand up, not yet. She just wanted the attention of our table. She got it. First Sergeant Carter looked annoyed at being interrupted. His wife looked confused. I just watched. This was it. "I just wanted to take a moment," Margaret said, her smile wide and bright, "since it's Julia's birthday." She began to stand up, a vision in an expensive navy blue silk gown. "And as you know, our family believes in celebrating our service members." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw two things happen simultaneously. Emma, my sister-in-law, sat up straighter, a cruel, excited smirk on her face, and David, my husband, pulled out his phone. He aimed the camera directly at me. He was filming. My heart beat a steady, cold rhythm. Thump. 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 The stage was hers. "Julia, dear," Margaret said, and now her voice was loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. The ambient noise of the ballroom seemed to fade away. We know how much your service means to you. So, for your birthday, we decided to serve you with this." She reached down and picked up the glittery, pink envelope, the one I had watched her pack. She slid it across the white linen tablecloth. It stopped right in front of my plate. My entire table was frozen. First Sergeant Carter, a man who had seen combat, stared at the pink envelope with a look of pure, unadulterated fury. He knew what this was. This was an ambush. This was an attack on his soldier, at his table. Happy birthday, dear, Margaret said, her voice dripping with poison she disguised as honey. Emma was giggling, her hand covering her mouth. David's hand, holding the phone, was perfectly steady. I looked at Margaret, I looked at the envelope, I looked at David. He met my gaze through his phone screen. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I didn't even breathe heavily. I simply acted. With the practiced economical movements of a soldier, I opened the black clutch in my lap. I reached inside. Margaret's smile widened. She thought I was reaching for a tissue. She thought the breakdown was beginning. I wasn't. I was reaching for my pen. I pulled out the simple, government-issue black pen I always carried. I clicked it. The sound was sharp, definitive. I pulled the glittery pink envelope toward me. I opened the flap. I slid out the thick stack of legal documents. I didn't read them. I didn't need to. I'd already seen the email. I flipped directly to the last page, the signature line, Julia M. Hall. They were all staring, waiting for the explosion, waiting for the tears, waiting for me to throw the papers, to scream. How could you? I gave them nothing. I uncapped the pen. With a hand that was as steady as David's, I signed my name. A clean, strong, assertive signature. I put the pen down. I slid the signed papers back into the envelope. I pushed it back across the table to Margaret. Then, I looked directly into her shocked, confused face. And I smiled. Thank you, Margaret, I said, my voice clear and calm. This is, truly, the most generous gift you could have possibly given me. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's triumphant smile froze, then collapsed. Her eyes widened. This was not in the script. Emma's giggle died in her throat. David actually lowered his phone. He stammered, That's it? That's all you? I turned my smile to him. The man I had loved. The traitor. Oh no, David, I said. That's not it. I have an announcement too. I turned back to Margaret, who was now staring at the signed papers as if they were a snake. You were right about something, Margaret, I said, my voice projecting just a little bit more. You said David, and I deserve better. And I agree. I reached back into my black clutch. This time, I pulled out the second folded document, the Aegis offer letter. Margaret's eyes narrowed, confused. What? What is that? This? I said. I held it up. This is my real birthday present, the one I got for myself. I unfolded the letter. You see, while you all were busy planning this adorable party, I said, I was a little busy too. I placed the letter on the table. I have just accepted a new position. It's as a project manager at Aegis Defense Solutions. David's face went white. He knew that name. He was an accountant. He knew what a top-tier defense contractor was. A project manager, I continued, my voice smooth, with a starting salary of $85,000 a year. I saw Emma's jaw physically drop. She dropped her iPhone onto the table with a clatter. Plus, I added, a very generous relocation package to Austin. I looked at Margaret. Her face had gone from confusion to a pale, slack-jawed horror. I leaned in, just a little. It's funny, Margaret, you and David always said my service was worthless, that I was just a grunt playing in the mud. I tapped the Aegis letter. It turns out Aegis feels differently. They said, and I quote, that my military logistics experience is an invaluable asset to them. Boom. The invaluable asset line landed like a mortar round. David was frozen, his phone now pointing uselessly at the floor, still recording. He was capturing his own humiliation. Margaret was speechless. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. And then, the moment I will cherish forever. First Sergeant Michael Carter, who had been watching this entire exchange with a hawk-like intensity, suddenly burst into a wide, brilliant smile. He stood up. He grabbed his glass of water. Ma'am, excuse me, he said to his wife, who was already beaming. He raised his glass high. His voice, his command voice, boomed across our section of the ballroom. A toast, he yelled. The tables nearby went quiet. A toast to Sergeant Hall. To her birthday. And to her new, bright, and valuable future at Aegis. Instantly, my entire table of soldiers and their spouses scrambled to their feet. They raised their glasses. To Sergeant Hall. Congratulations, Julia. You deserve it, Sergeant. It was a wave of pure, unfiltered support. But it wasn't over. The commotion had caught the attention of the VIP tables at the front of the ballroom. I saw him stand up, our battalion commander, a lieutenant colonel. A man I had only ever spoken to when I was at rigid attention. He wasn't in a tux. He was in his formal mess dress uniform, covered in medals. He began to walk over. The Hall family, still frozen, watched as this man, this leader, walked directly to our table. He walked right past them. He stopped in front of me. I, by instinct, started to stand up to go to attention. He put a hand on my shoulder, gently. At ease, Sergeant. Stay seated. He smiled. First Sergeant Carter. I heard that toast. He turned to me. He held out his hand. Sergeant Hall, is it true? Aegis Solutions? Yes, sir, I managed. He shook my hand, a firm, strong grip. Their gain, Sergeant. The Army's loss is the defense industry's gain. You are one of our finest NCOs. They are lucky to have you. He looked at David. He looked at Margaret. He didn't know them, but he understood exactly what was happening. His eyes were pure ice. He turned back to me, his voice warm again. Congratulations, Sergeant. Truly. Thank you, sir, I said. He nodded and walked back to his table. I was surrounded. My fellow NCOs, their wives, everyone was patting me on the back, offering congratulations, asking about the new job. I was completely, totally, and publicly vindicated. And the Halls, Margaret, David, and Emma, were just there, silent, humiliated, completely and utterly isolated in a sea of respect, a respect that was all pointed at me. I looked at them one last time. 3 broken, pathetic statues. I picked up my black clutch. I stood up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked away. I didn't run. I walked. I nodded at my soldiers, at my NCO brothers and sisters who were still cheering, their faces lit up with genuine joy for me. I gave a final respectful nod to First Sergeant Carter, who simply dipped his chin, a look of profound fatherly pride on his face. Then I turned my back on the Hall family. I didn't look back. Not once. I didn't need to see Margaret's collapsed vanity, or Emma's spoiled pout, or David's pathetic, hollowed-out expression. I was done with them. I walked out of the ballroom, my footsteps steady on the marble floor. The sounds of the party, the music, the laughter, the congratulations, faded behind me. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the convention center. And I stepped out into the cool, damp Texas night air. I stopped. I looked up at the dark sky, at the hazy streetlights of Killeen, and I took a breath. It was the first real breath I had taken in 2 years. It didn't carry the weight of Margaret's judgment or David's disappointment. It was just air. It was freedom. I didn't cry. I was too empty, too exhausted, and too relieved. The adrenaline from the ballroom began to drain away, leaving a profound, aching exhaustion. But I was free. I got in my Jeep and drove home, to the house I shared with David. It wasn't our house anymore. It was just a place, a temporary holding area. He didn't come home that night. Neither did Margaret or Emma. I slept, for the first time in 2 years, in the middle of the bed. I slept deeply, heavily, and without dreams. The next 2 weeks were a blur of logistics. I was a logistics NCO after all. This was my specialty. I met with a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in downtown Killeen who specialized in military divorces. I sat in her office, which smelled like old books and strong coffee, and I told her the story. When I got to the part about the army ball, she stopped me. He filmed it, she asked, her eyes lighting up. Yes, ma'am, I said. His sister, too. They were both recording. My lawyer, Ms. Evans, leaned back in her chair, a wide, shark-like grin spreading across her face. Sergeant Hall, she said. In Texas, we can have at-fault divorces. They just handed us the entire case on a silver platter. She explained that under Texas law, cruelty was grounds for an unequal division of assets, and a coordinated public humiliation planned by his mother at a formal military event on your birthday. She savored the words. That, Sergeant, is the definition of premeditated cruelty. We need that video. I don't have it, I said. Oh, he does, she smiled. And he will be legally compelled to provide it in discovery. They thought they were filming your humiliation. What they were actually doing was creating Exhibit A. And that's exactly what happened. David's own lawyer, no doubt horrified, had to turn over the phone footage. Ms. Evans called me after she watched it. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was furious. It's worse than you described, she said, her voice tight. The look on their faces, their laughter. We're going to burn them to the ground, Sergeant. Margaret's old money lawyers from Dallas tried to fight, but the video was undeniable. It was a clear-cut case of planned, malicious, emotional abuse. The judge was appalled. Margaret had tried to trap me, to throw me out with nothing. Instead, she had given me everything. The divorce was settled quickly. I got a very favorable agreement. I kept my Jeep. I kept all of my own money. And most importantly, I kept every single penny of my military pension, my TSP, my thrift savings plan. David and his mother had no claim to it. The grunt's dirty money, as it turned out, was fully protected. As soon as David realized what was happening, that I was really gone, that his mother's plan had backfired, and that he was facing a very public, very ugly legal defeat, the text started. At first, it was pure, panicked rage. What the hell are you doing, Julia? You're making a fool of yourself. You're making a fool of me. You think this is funny? You humiliated my mother, after all she did for you. I didn't reply. Then, about a day later, the tone shifted to bargaining. Okay, look, I get it. You're mad. You made your point. You can come home now. Mom's gone back to Dallas. Julia, come on. Don't throw 2 years away over one bad night. One bad night. I almost laughed. I still didn't reply. Then, finally, came the pathetic, whimpering desperation. The messages would come in at 2 a.m. Julia, please, I'm sorry. It was all Mom's idea. You know what she's like. I never wanted to hurt you. I'm sitting here alone. The house is so empty. I miss you. I love you. I read that last text. I love you. And I felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt something. Pity. Pity that this 32-year-old man was so weak, so hollowed out, that he didn't even know what the word meant. He didn't love me. He loved that I was a convenient, stable presence that didn't challenge his mother. I read his words, and I felt pity, not love. And that's how I knew I was truly done. I was walking to my car in the barracks parking lot after my final out-processing briefing. It was raining. I had my head down, my keys in my hand, my mind already in Austin, when a car pulled up, blocking my path. It was David. He jumped out of his car, his expensive work clothes already soaked. Julia, stop, please. I stopped. I just looked at him. He looked terrible. He was unshaven. His eyes were red. He looked like a little boy who had been told no. Julia, please, he begged, coming toward me. Don't do this. Don't leave. You don't have to do this. We can talk. We can go to counseling. We can work this out. I looked at his face, the face I had loved, the face I had cooked for and slept next to and cried over. I'd wanted so badly for this man to be my partner, to be my family. And in that rainy parking lot, I felt a sharp, sudden pang. It wasn't love. It was grief. It was the last dying ache for the idea of what we could have been. The grief for the man I'd thought he was. I had to accept that man never existed. This was the wisdom First Sergeant Carter talked about. Accepting what I could not change. I couldn't change him. I couldn't change his mother. I could only change me. David, I said. My voice was calm. It was so calm. It didn't waver. It's over. No, Julia, it's not. I love you. No, you don't, I said, and the simple truth of it just hung in the air. You don't, and that's okay. I took a step toward my car. He moved to block me. Please, what am I supposed to do? I looked him right in the eye. David, your life belongs to your mother. My life belongs to me. It was the last thing I ever said to him. Goodbye, David. I got in my Jeep. He was still yelling, Julia, Julia. I put the key in the ignition. I turned the car on. I backed out of the space. He just stood there in the rain, watching me go. I drove out of the parking lot. I drove off the base. I pulled over at the first gas station. I took out my phone. I looked at his name. This was it. The final cut. The final boundary. It was painful. It was a death. But it was necessary. I pressed his name. I scrolled down. I hit block. The past was behind me. It was time to look forward. 18 months later. I'm standing in my office. It's on the 22nd floor of a glass and steel building that pierces the bright Texas sky. But this isn't Killeen. This isn't Dallas. This is Austin. The skyline is alive, a testament to energy, technology, and a future that is constantly being built. It is a world away from the stagnant, old money traditions of Highland Park. On the frosted glass of my door, it doesn't say Mrs. David Hall. It doesn't say Sergeant. It says Julia Hall, Senior Project Manager. I'm wearing a sharp, dark gray corporate pantsuit. It feels different from my Army service uniform. Not heavier or lighter, just different. It's a new kind of armor, one that I chose. I'm looking out the window, not at a dusty motor pool, but at the rolling green hills west of the city. I'm sipping coffee. Not the burnt, sludgy coffee from the base, but a smooth, single-origin pour-over. I am 33 years old. I have a six-figure salary. And last month, I closed on my own first-floor condo near Zilker Park. My name, my mortgage, my life, it's quiet. It's peaceful. A kind of peace I never knew existed. It's strange. The very things Margaret Hall despised about me, the very things David was ashamed of, are the exact reasons I am standing here. In the corporate world of defense contracting, they don't care who your father is. They don't care what charity events you attend. They care about one thing: results. They don't call my NCO discipline rigid. They call it focused. They don't call my ability to manage soldiers bossy. They call it leadership. They don't call my experience in a war zone motor pool playing in the mud. They call it grace under pressure. My first performance review, my new boss, a vice president who used to be a Marine colonel, looked at my metrics. Hall, he said, you run your teams with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned NCO. It's a breath of fresh air. We're promoting you. Here, I'm not respected because of the man I married or the family name I carried. I'm respected because of my competence. I'm respected for the very skills I earned while wearing a uniform. The skills that woman, in her silk gown, called service with a sneer. My new life was good. It was full. I was healing. I was building. I thought the chapter on the Army was closed, a part of my past that I was grateful for, but a part that was over. Then I got the email. It wasn't from LinkedIn. It wasn't from a corporate headhunter. The sender was a .mil address. It was from the command group at Fort Cavazos. My heart hammered. I hadn't realized Fort Hood had been renamed. A new name for a new era. It felt appropriate. The email was formal. The Army's G1 personnel was requesting my presence. Not for a meeting, not for a recall. They were inviting me to be the keynote speaker for the installation's quarterly TAP session. TAP, the Transition Assistance Program. The mandatory course that every single soldier, from a private to a colonel, has to take before they leave the military. The course that's designed to help them transition, to translate their skills, to prepare them for the outside world. They were asking me to come back, to stand on that stage, to be the bridge between the world I left and the world I had just conquered. I wrote back in 2 minutes. Yes. A week later, I find myself standing on the stage of an auditorium I know well. It's the same one I sat in for my own TAP course, terrified and broken. But today, I am not in the audience. I am at the podium. In front of me are 300 soldiers, Young privates, seasoned sergeants, older officers, all of them in their camouflage uniforms. All of them looking at me with the same quiet anxiety I once had. The fear of the unknown. The fear of not being good enough for the civilian world. I look down at my notes. Then I look up. I see their faces. And I push my notes aside. "Good morning, Fort Cavazos," I say. My voice is steady, amplified by the microphone. "My name is Julia Hall. 18 months ago, I was one of you. I was a sergeant, a logistics NCO, right here on this post. And I was terrified. I was terrified that everything I had done, everything I had learned, wouldn't mean a thing out there." I pointed to the exit sign. "You're going to hear from a lot of people. And some of them in your life might tell you that you need to transition. They'll tell you that you need to adapt. They'll tell you that your military experience isn't valuable in the real world. They'll tell you that you are just a grunt, a server." I let the words hang in the air. I am here from that real world to tell you one thing. They are wrong. A ripple of energy goes through the room. They're listening now. Your discipline, your ability to show up on time, every time. Your leadership, whether you led a team of 2 or a platoon of 30. Your unshakable calm when everything is on fire and the mission must get done. These are not things to be transitioned out of. These are not things to forget. I smiled, feeling a fire I hadn't felt in a long time. "Those skills," I said, my voice ringing with absolute certainty, "are the rarest, most valuable commodities in the business world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." I paused, and my eyes scanned the front row. And that's when I saw him. Sitting in the front row, in a civilian polo shirt, was Michael Carter, my old first sergeant. He wasn't in uniform. The email had mentioned he was on terminal leave, about to retire. He wasn't crying. He wasn't cheering. He was just smiling. A quiet, knowing, deeply proud smile. He saw me. He had always seen me. Seeing him, seeing those soldiers, it all crystallized. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I took a deep breath and gave them my final thought. The truth. "Look," I said, "leaving is scary. Change is scary. But I learned something. I learned it from a very wise first sergeant right here on this post." I looked right at Carter. He taught me about the serenity prayer, about the wisdom to know the difference between what you cannot change and what you can. You cannot change the minds of people who are determined to misunderstand you. You cannot change the prejudices of people who look down on you. You cannot change their bitterness or their jealousy or their hate. But you can change your life. You can change your future. You can take your skills, your integrity, and your strength, and you can build a new life from the ground up. Don't be afraid of the change, I finished. Be brave enough to change the things you can. The auditorium was silent for a beat. And then it erupted. It wasn't just polite applause. It was cheering. It was soldiers standing on their feet. First Sergeant Carter was the first one up. I walked off that stage, not as a victim, not as a soldier, but just as Julia. I felt a profound sense of gratitude. It was a strange thought, one that settled on me as I drove my own car back to my own apartment in my new city. I was grateful for Margaret Hall. Her cruelty, her malice, her pathological need to destroy, she hadn't. She had liberated me. Her vicious birthday gift wasn't a curse. It was the key. That hateful, glittering envelope she slid across the table. In the end, it really was the greatest gift I ever received. It was the gift of my own life. Thank you for staying with me, for listening to my story. This journey of healing was mine, but I know the feelings of being undervalued, of fighting to be seen, are shared by so many. My story is finished, but yours may still be writing. If this story gave you strength or validated your own worth, please support this channel by hitting the like button and subscribing for more stories of resilience. And in the comments, I want to see you claim your own power. Just comment, "I am valuable," below. Because you are.